Right now, inside of you, there is an engineering marvel that's way more complex than any superhighway on Earth. It's your circulatory system. It is this vast, powerful network that is working nonstop, 24/7, to keep you alive. So today, we're going to dive into the incredible force that drives it all, your blood pressure.
Okay, just take a look at this number, 95,000 kilometers. Now, to put that into perspective, that's enough to circle the entire planet Earth more than twice. Just let that sink in for a moment.
Believe it or not, that's the length of all the blood vessels in your body, if you could somehow line them all up end to end. It's just mind-boggling, right? And through this massive network, your body pumps over 7,500 liters of blood every single day. That's a huge job, delivering vital oxygen and nutrients to literally every cell.
So you gotta wonder, right? How does all that fluid actually get moved around? Well, it takes a constant force. And that force, the pressure that your blood exerts on the walls of your arteries and veins, well, that's what we call blood pressure. It's this invisible push that keeps the entire system flowing, and it rises and falls with every single beat of your heart.
Okay, so how do we actually measure this force? I mean, you've probably had your blood pressure taken a million times at the doctor's office, right? They wrap that cuff around your arm, and then they give you two numbers. So what do those numbers actually mean? Let's break it down.
So your reading is always two numbers, one on top of the other. And a really good way to think about it is like a wave. The top number, that's the systolic pressure. That's the peak of the wave. It's the highest amount of force when your heart contracts to push blood out. Then you have the bottom number, the diastolic pressure. And that's the trough, or the lowest point of the wave. It's the pressure when your heart is resting in between beats.
So what's the goal? Well, for a typical healthy person, the magic numbers we're looking for are usually a little bit less than 120/80. If you're in that zone, it's a good sign that the pressure in your system is in a healthy, totally manageable range.
But what happens when that pressure gets too high? To really get a handle on this, the easiest way to think about it is to imagine your circulatory system as a big, complicated set of pipes, kind of like the plumbing in your house. And we all know what happens when plumbing goes wrong, right? The pressure starts to build up. So problem number one has to do with the fluid itself. Imagine trying to push honey through a straw instead of water. If your blood thickens for whatever reason, it's just harder to move. So you need a higher pressure to push it through the pipes, and that forces your heart to work way harder just to get the job done.
Okay, problem number two, just plain extra fluid. Let's say you have a diet that's really high in salt. What happens is that salt makes your body hold on to more water. All that extra water increases your total blood volume, which, you guessed it, increases the pressure on the walls of those pipes. It's a pretty simple equation, really. More fluid means more pressure.
And that brings us to problem number three. The pipes themselves actually get narrower. This can happen when you're stressed out. Your body releases hormones like epinephrine, and what these hormones do is cause some of your key blood vessels to constrict, to tighten up. And when the pipes get smaller, it's a lot harder for the same amount of blood to get through. This increases the resistance, and that drives the pressure way, way up.
Now look, your blood vessels are pretty amazing. They're incredibly resilient, and they can handle these little ups and downs in pressure no problem. But what happens when that pressure stays high? Not just for a few minutes, but for a long, long time. Well, that's when the damage can get really serious. And the scary part is, it often happens completely silently.
And this condition, it has a medical name you've probably heard, hypertension. That's just the fancy term for when your blood pressure regularly stays above a healthy level. And we're not talking about a temporary spike because you're exercising or stressed. We're talking about a constant elevated state of pressure day in and day out.
So what's the cutoff? Generally, the threshold for hypertension is a reading that is consistently over 140/90. Once you're regularly in that zone, that constant long-term strain on your arteries really starts to take its toll. Let's go back to that plumbing analogy. If you have way too much water pressure in your house, what happens? Eventually, you're going to damage the pipes. It's the exact same idea in your body. This constant high-pressure strain actually causes tiny little tears in the walls of your arteries, and your body's natural response is for that injured tissue to swell up as it tries to heal itself.
But this is where things can start to get really dangerous. See, your body sends white blood cells to the scene of the injury as part of the healing process. But then, other stuff that's floating around in your blood, especially things like LDL, or what we call bad cholesterol, starts to get stuck there, latching onto these injured spots. Over time, all this gunk builds up and hardens into a substance we call plaque.
This whole process leads to a condition called atherosclerosis. It's basically the stiffening and thickening of your artery walls because of all that plaque buildup. So those pipes that were once nice and flexible,
They become hard and narrow. And you can imagine that makes it even harder for blood to get through.
The absolute most dangerous moment, though, is when one of these plaques breaks open, or ruptures. Your body sees this as a new injury, so it rushes to form a blood clot to seal the tear. But here's the problem. That clot can end up completely blocking the artery, which is already narrowed by the plaque. And if that blockage happens in an artery that's feeding your heart, that's a heart attack. If it happens in an artery going to your brain, that's a stroke.
Okay, I know that sounds absolutely terrifying, and it is. But the good news is, modern medicine has come up with some truly incredible ways to fix these blockages and get the blood flowing again. So let's take a look at one of the most common solutions out there.
It's a procedure called an angioplasty. It's pretty amazing how it works. First, doctors thread a super thin wire through the blood vessel right to the blockage. Then they slide a tiny, deflated balloon over that wire. Once it's in the perfect spot, they inflate the balloon. This squishes the plaque up against the artery wall, forcing that passageway open. And a lot of the time, they'll leave behind a little mesh tube called a stent just to make sure the vessel stays propped open.
The end result is just elegant and, frankly, life-saving. It's all about letting the blood flow freely to replenish the oxygen-starved cells downstream. It's really a direct mechanical fix for a very critical plumbing problem.
Let's zoom out for a second and think about the big picture. Over an average lifetime, your heart is going to beat about 2.5 billion times. Just think about that. Every single one of those beats sends another wave of pressure through your entire system.
I mean, that number is just staggering, isn't it? It sounds like an absolutely impossible amount of pressure to handle. But here's the amazing thing. Your arteries are built for this. They are naturally strong, they're elastic, they were perfectly designed to take on this lifelong challenge.
So, your body's incredible plumbing system is working for you tirelessly, day in and day out, without you even having to think about it. Now that we've seen how it all works and what can go wrong, the real question for all of us is this: how can we help them do their job? How can we help our arteries stay flexible under all that pressure?